Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari. Just a year ago, this phrase sounded like pure fiction. A seven-time champion, a living legend of Mercedes, swapping his silver overalls for red and heading to Maranello to rewrite history and claim an eighth title. Fans were anticipating a second coming of Schumacher, a legend who would once again lead Scuderia to the top. But reality turned out to be quite different. Half a season has passed, and Lewis's best result is merely fourth place. Not a single podium, a string of qualifying failures. Even Hamilton himself admits, "I'm useless." After Hungary, he jokingly suggested that Ferrari might consider replacing himself. Fred Vasseur was honest. They were all naive. They thought that the experience and talent of a seven-time champion would instantly solve all problems. But the transition turned out to be far more painful. It wasn't about one mistake, but hundreds of small details. Everything from brake settings to the engineer's communication style felt unfamiliar. And these details have resulted in what currently appears to be a complete failure. For Lewis, this blow is particularly painful. His career has always been built within a single ecosystem. From 2007 to 2024, he drove only cars with Mercedes engines. He spent 12 consecutive years at Mercedes. This is a record in F1 history for the longest partnership between a driver and a team. Schumacher-Ferrari lasted 11 seasons. Verstappen-Red Bull has been at it for 10. Hamilton broke all records. During this time, the team became his home. Mercedes grew alongside him. Engineers knew his style down to the smallest detail. But at Ferrari, he found himself in a foreign environment. Even small things like brakes turned out to be different. At Mercedes, he used Carbon Industries all his life, while at Scuderia, they used Brembo. This might seem trivial to a viewer, but for a driver who feels the car through the pedal, it's a huge change. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. At Ferrari, everything is different. Race preparation processes, priorities, and communication styles. All these factors disrupt Lewis's usual rhythm. While for Raikkonen or Alonso, such changes were common. They were accustomed to changing teams and learning anew. For Hamilton, this is the first genuine adaptation experience since McLaren, and it turned out that readjusting on the fly is incredibly difficult. Vasseur openly admitted that Ferrari had oversimplified the picture. Everyone, without exception, thought that Lewis's experience and authority would automatically bring stability. But it turned out the opposite. The transition itself became a source of chaos. "We were foolish to think everything would be under control," he said. And this is evident in the numbers. In the early stages, Hamilton gradually reduced his gap from Leclerc. He even won the Chinese sprint and its qualifying. But all this was forgotten almost instantly. In Canada, Spain, Austria, and Great Britain, Lewis even outperformed his teammate in qualifying, showing progress. But just as it seemed that adaptation was going in the right direction, Belgium and Hungary happened, and there everything collapsed again. Mistakes, penalties, crashes in Q2, and even Q1. Meanwhile, Leclerc was taking podiums and showing that Ferrari was capable of more. Lewis himself looked depressed after these races. He spoke about not feeling the car, not understanding where he was losing time. Even his usual confidence was gone. For someone who had been dominating the championship for years, this was a severe blow. Fortunately, Maranello created a comfort zone for Hamilton. Several key people from Mercedes, Loic Serra and Jerome D'Ambrosio, joined Ferrari with him. For Lewis, these are familiar faces who more or less understand his language and habits and can translate them into Ferrari terms. Nevertheless, the question remains open. How long will this painful process last, and how long is Ferrari willing to wait for Hamilton to truly adapt? Despite all the difficulties, Ferrari is not giving up on its high-profile newcomer. Moreover, Vasseur emphasizes that in the long term, Hamilton could be the key to Scuderia's success. This is primarily about the 2026 season. The new technical era will revolutionize Formula One. New engines, different aerodynamics, revised rules. Cars will require pilots to have a much more complex and certainly fresh approach to managing the energy system. And here Hamilton's experience becomes invaluable. Over the years at Mercedes, he didn't just learn to use hybrids. He was one of those who, together with the team, perfected them. Vasseur is confident that once the new era begins, Hamilton's ability to finally manage the complex power unit will give Ferrari an advantage. This sets him apart from most of the younger generation of drivers. Plus, it's important not to forget that Lewis's adaptation is not just a personal story. Ferrari is changing too. The arrival of new engineers from Mercedes creates a bridge between the past and the future. A team is forming where Scuderia's experience combines with methodologies tested on the championship-winning car from Brackley. Although the first half of 2025 has brought more disappointments than modesty, Maranello remains calm. They understand that Hamilton's transition is an investment not for a few months, but for several years. Even if the 8th title doesn't come immediately, the very fact that Ferrari and Lewis have joined forces is already changing the balance of power in the paddock. So today's failures are just part of a long journey. And now the question is different. Will Lewis be able to turn the situation around just like Michael Schumacher did back in the day? After all, it was he who transformed the late 1990s Ferrari from a team with potential into a dominant force for many years. To understand just how unique Hamilton's situation is, it's worth recalling how other champions handled similar transitions. Michael Schumacher joined Ferrari in 1996 and didn't shine with super results in his early years either. There were wins, of course, but consistency was lacking. However, a whole team was built around him. Ross Brawn, Rory Byrne, Jean Todt. By the start of 2000, Ferrari had become a winning machine. Ultimately, the process took 4 seasons. Fernando Alonso joined Scuderia in 2010 and immediately began fighting for the title. However, his partnership with Ferrari never resulted in a championship. The car was fast, but not on par with Red Bull. Nevertheless, Alonso adapted instantly because he had always been able to work with new teams and adapt to the car. Sebastian Vettel showed speed in red in 2015, but gradually became a victim of the same small details that are currently hindering Hamilton. Ferrari often made strategic mistakes, and he himself didn't always find common ground with the team. The result? 5 years without a title and a disappointed parting. Now Lewis, unlike all these champions, had long been unable to imagine himself without working with Toto Wolff. Hamilton is a person whom his previous team largely nurtured to the level of a historical legend and adapted to. For him, Ferrari is the first truly foreign home he came to, not at the beginning of his journey, but already as an icon of motorsport. That's why his adaptation is the most difficult. If Hamilton manages to turn the situation around, and if Ferrari manages to utilize his experience and adapt alongside him, the partnership could truly become historic. But if not, we will witness one of the most high-profile yet painful mistakes in the history of the Queen of Motorsport. However, Scuderia is not the only stable for which drivers have been willing to make any, even the most difficult changes. In Formula One, with rare exceptions, there is a change of drivers every season. Today we will look at some of the most interesting cases that led to interesting consequences, both for the Queen of Motorsport and for the driver. At the same time, we will not touch on Ferrari to avoid repetition. It is also important that in such analyses and discussions, we should not take into account Formula One of the 90s and early 2000s. Back then, drivers could literally live on tests and perfectly adapt to a new car. In 2010, Formula One experienced a surge in driver transfers. The reigning champion, Jenson Button, moved to a team capable of regularly competing for victories, McLaren. Did he manage to adapt? Absolutely. After the 4th race, he led the Drivers' Championship with a 10-point lead, and throughout the year he earned multiple podiums and finished in the top 5. In 2012, Kimi Räikkönen returned to Formula One. After 2 long years away from Grand Prix, spending time in rallying, he joined Lotus. The Finn performed quite well in the early races, although it took him some time to adapt. By the 4th race, he was already competing for victory. In the end, Kimi Räikkönen secured 3rd place in the Drivers' Championship. He got a good feel for the car and was able to quickly start getting the most out of it. Valtteri Bottas was long considered one of the most talented drivers of his generation. In 2017, his contract was bought out by Wolff, and thus the Finn joined Mercedes. At the German team, Valtteri became successful quite quickly. He finished his first Grand Prix on the podium and won the 4th one. That was in Sochi. Bottas tends to prefer a stable car in races and handles it more aggressively in qualifying. By the way, he earned his first podium in the third race. Finally, let's remember Fernando Alonso. The Spaniard was very good when he returned to Formula One with Alpine, and then proved his top form by finishing third in his very first Grand Prix in Imola. Were there examples where adaptation, on the contrary, took a long time but eventually led to results? Yes, but the higher the team's level, the more pressure there is and the fewer chances there are of such an endeavor succeeding. Zhou Guanyu had a poor rookie season, but looked much stronger the following year. Yuki Tsunoda had a bad 2021 but came back stronger in 2022 and even started outperforming his teammates. Esteban Ocon performed poorly in 2020 but looked better the following year. The worst thing that could happen to Hamilton is Ricciardo's fate. 2 years of suffering in a team aiming for victories. Lewis is afraid of repeating Daniel's destiny, and so far there are quite a few similarities in their stories. Usually, though, they manifest themselves in qualifying sessions. Formula One is not just about on-track battles. It's about adaptation paths, mistakes, and the long search for the perfect balance between driver and car. We will follow how the Hamilton-Ferrari story unfolds, and we'll definitely discuss it with you. Subscribe to our social media. Links are in the description. There we share news, insights, and analytics that you won't find in broadcasts. Also, join our live streams on Fridays right here on YouTube. Together we discuss recent events, debate strategies, and prepare for the weekend. This has been Formula for Everyone. See you next time.